We're going to try our best to review the North Corridor by Chevelle with construction outside. And while it is a little bit annoying, it's actually kind of oddly fitting considering we're talking about Chevelle. In fact, I was discussing this a little bit earlier on social media and stated that, while a band like the Deftones continues to sort of reinvent some different aspects about themselves, they're the types that maybe were homeowners and then decide to move into a bigger, a better, a more modern home. Chevelle really is resemblant more so of the homeowner that decides to make modifications to their own place. Perhaps they throw a new coat of paint or something down in their den. Either that or they replace the windows, they update their carpets. It's something that always gives their home, or their music in this case, a fresh feel, even though they don't really stray too far from what it is that makes them them. Now, 2014's La Gargola was definitely an album that showcased a little bit more experimentation and expansion of their sound. Does the North Corridor continue in that direction? I'll answer that question right away, and it's sort of there, but not really. In fact, it seems like where they push the boundaries with La Gargola is where they want to be as a band right now, which is not a bad place to be, considering that album really took a lot of people by surprise, and it was one that also showed that this group had the ability to evolve in general. So whenever you get into the first couple of tracks, Door to Door Cannibals and Enemies, you notice something right away, as even though Chevelle still sounds the same that you probably remember, it's still extremely easy to listen to. There's just something about how they build their sort of layer cake of thick bass, the percussion that you hear in the background very subtly that intertwines with the hum of the feedback from the guitar work, and just the way in which their tone can easily shift from a more aggressive mid-pace to one that's a little bit more of a crawl. It's something that is just still downright fun to listen to. Whereas most of their mates within their alternative metal, scene that came from the latter portion of the 1990s or the first part of the 2000s started to sound a little bit derivative. This is a group that really them sticking to this idea is advantageous to them, considering it still boasts a high level of just listenability and ease to that listenability. And these two tracks definitely give that option and give that feeling to a listener. Joyride is the first single off of this album. It's not one that I've heard on the radio really littered all about. Then again, I don't listen to the radio very much, so it could be everywhere and I wouldn't know it, but it sort of follows along the same philosophy. The one thing that disappoints me about this disc is that you don't see a lot of longer tracks on here. On La Gargola, there were a couple of tracks that were pushing close to the 6-minute corridor, and those were very expansive, almost atmospheric airiness to them. It was something that really boasted that album and gave it that degree of little extra oomph factor, that little extra, effort, I guess, if you really want to call it, or it definitely showcased a band that was attempting new things. With this album, they definitely opted to go a little bit simpler with at least the first half of this. The second half of it, though, tends to really sort of go back into some of those experiments that were experienced on the last album, and that's most notably featured on Punchline, which is, it pushes further than the 5-minute mark, and it's one that kind of takes some of that. It almost has this strange, little club feel to it, a club alternative song. Imagine that. It's almost like imagining REM with synths and a bass drop. It just doesn't make any sense, you would think. But Punchline ends up being one of the strongest tracks on this album. It's a fantastic vocal performance, and the music, while it is one that does not, it's that less is more approach for the song. It's not one that needs to do too much at once. It slowly but surely builds that layer cake that Chevelle has sort of gotten a little bit known for, and it continues to build until its crescendo point right before the end point of the song. So around the 4-minute mark is where you start to hear a lot of stuff cascade together and then eventually lead to your fade. And this track, I just really like how it's constructed, since it does sort of take on that approach of, minimalism being compounded and sort of thrown together, almost like a trash ball or a rubber band ball, where it eventually becomes something that's huge, something that becomes extremely dense and extremely layered, something that has a lot of character to it and a lot of motion. So they build kinesis almost out of these static figures or these static ideas coming together, which certainly makes for an interesting experience. Definitely one of the most unique songs on this album, though the most unique will probably also be one of the it will definitely shine as different within their catalog, and that's Shot from a Canon, the very final cut, which is 8 minutes and 11 seconds long. I can't remember a track from them being longer, but this is one that starts off really as a traditional Chevelle song, traditional enough at least for this age, and then really breaks down into something that almost sounds like it should be maybe on a stoner record. You know, it's a little bit of repetition, a little bit of riff building, a little bit of just allowing sort of these instruments, the bass, and really, you know, couple up a little with some softer guitar tone, or at least with some crunch to it, and then couple up with that that percussive background in order to give it a backbone, and then it just sort of waves a little bit over the course of a couple of minutes, and it builds an atmosphere, it builds a theme. It's one that has a bit of a, I don't want to say industrial, because you think of the music, you know, you think of the genre whenever that word is used, but you almost think about watching a movie and seeing a you know, a scene that is in an industrial area, you know, a hard-working area, one that sort of is building up a little bit of suspense, a little bit of action perhaps, coupled together, and this is something that you'd almost expect to hear as the backdrop for that. It's really unique. It's not one that I necessarily think channels that 8 minutes exceptionally well, but I think it does enough to really showcase that this band is willing to try a couple of different things. Kind of, you know, instead of deciding to just replace the TV, maybe they look into a projector screen or something like that, you know. It's something that just changes up the fold a little bit. And you have to appreciate a group that is willing to take those risks every now and again when their, you know, core sound, when their baseline sound is already one that's paying them dividends. Now, there's probably a reason why Chevelle has only sold 4 million records, whereas their peers have probably sold, you know, anywhere between 10 to 20 million records. So this is a group that definitely is not going to be as catchy at all times, but this is certainly also one where those little subtle minute changes really help. Not to mention, the group just has a great sense of themselves and what they want to be, and that's to be appreciated as well. You know, downfalls of this is that it doesn't feel like it has as much of that sort of creative zen that La Gargola really boasted, but trying to compare those two albums is a bit unfair. And I feel like some of these tracks could have had a little bit more of a, you know, a little bit more sensibility to it, I guess. It's ones that, you know, these are a lot of tracks that have some real kinesis to it, a lot of motion. I feel like they could have had one or two that just sort of airs things out. Sort of use that 8 minutes track, or maybe throw that somewhere in the middle and have a real spacey sort of way to end side A if we were using old cassette tapes. But overall, pretty good album. This is certainly one that I recommend for fans of alternative rock, for fans of you know, the more radio-friendly side of what some people may consider to be new metal or heavy metal. This is definitely an 84 out of 100. Highly recommended. What did you guys think about it? What did you guys think about the North Corridor by Chevelle? I know a couple of you guys were really hopeful that I was going to get to this. What are your thoughts? Let me know. I'm coverkillernation. We have a lot to talk about this weekend. There's a shitload of stuff coming out, so it's definitely a weekend to subscribe if you haven't already. We have albums from Cradle of Filth. It's a re-release, but it's still a new album. Wolverine, which is a progressive band that is absolutely exceptional. The Senatrex, and a couple of others that we need to talk to. Deadlock. Man, it's going to be a good weekend, so I'll talk with you then. Take care.